In addition to changing the tempo of a file, warping can be used to optimize how a clip loops, fix rhythmic errors, and quantize audio. So let's take a look and see how that all works. So I've got exercise 9 from chapter 6, and I've got a couple things set up for you, but let's start with this clip here in session view on this drum loop track. So now that we can see it down here in clip view, I'll mention that, as I have in past videos, Live is amazing at analyzing clips and then stretching them to fit the tempo of different tempos in different projects. Occasionally, though, it gets confused. And this is one of those instances. Now, this is occurring because there's a drum loop at the beginning of this. It starts in the middle of a bar, and we actually have an 8.5 bar long piece of audio here, and this Live has actually ended up analyzing this as 8 measures. So I'm going to have to actually manually go in and fix all of this. Now, as preparation for doing that, typically what I would do would be to go through and see that all the transient markers are in the right place. Now, when I'm zoomed out this far, those transient markers, these little white things in the scrub area. So I would typically zoom in and go through and go, okay, that's in the right spot. That looks good. That one, it looks like it's at the peak of the waveform and not at the beginning. So maybe I want to move that one. So now that I'm zoomed in, I can see they're little triangles, and I can move that transient marker by holding down my shift key, hovering my mouse, and then dragging that so that it's aligned with the audio where I want it. Now, at other times, Live may put one of these where one shouldn't be, or there may be one missing entirely. So for example, right over here before measure 5, this one is actually not in the place where there's a transient, but it's kind of at the end of this decay, and Live thinks it's the transient. So I can get rid of that by click selecting it and then just hitting my delete key. Now, if one should go there, I can add it back by using the key command Command-Shift-I or Control-Shift-I on a PC. And now when I move my cursor away, you can see that I've added one there. Well, we don't need that, so let's get rid of it. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out. And over here at the beginning, I know that this first little bit is all drum fill, and this is actually beat 1 of the clip. So I'm going to zoom in there. You'll notice that my grid is disabled. Let me re-enable that. That's going to be Command-4 on a Mac or Control-4 on a PC. And I'm also going to set my grid so that it makes a little more sense. Now, the smallest rhythmic increment in this clip is a 16th note, so I'm going to set it there. So now what I need to do to start to get to align this correctly would be to promote one or more of these transient markers to a warp marker. And I can do that by double-clicking on it. And now we see that there's a triangle with a little gold box on top of it. Now with that as a warp marker, I can move that and it will move the underlying audio with it. So I can click and I can pop that over onto the grid. Now with that on the grid, I can right-click and I'm going to choose Set 1.1 here from the contextual menu, and that will realign the numbering here in the ruler with this being the beginning of the measure. And if I zoom back out, you'll see this is negative over here where this drum lead-in is. Then the next thing I'm going to do, and also I'll zoom out so you can see what's going to happen here. I'm going to right-click and I'm going to choose Warp 92 BPM from here. That's the set tempo. And you'll see that it has realigned the ruler and the grid to better align with the audio at this tempo. Didn't move the audio. It just realigned the grid so that the analysis of where the transient markers are at and what the tempo and length of this clip are now lined up. And if we look at this fully zoomed out, we can see that this is now an 8.5 bar clip, not an 8 measure clip. So now that this is better aligned, I'm going to hold down my Option key and I'm going to click and drag this to a couple of other clip slots. So as I do further editing, I'm not editing on the source clip. So let's choose the second one. And what I want to do is I want to make a nice 4-bar loop out of this. So I'm going to drag my loop brace over here to 1-1 and over, let me grab both of these at the end, and I'm going to put those over at 5. Now I know the beginning of this is well aligned. Let me zoom in and check the end. And I can see, oh, that's not exactly on. So let me double click and turn that into a warp marker, and I'll drag that over. So we've got this correctly aligned to be a 4-bar loop. And now I'm going to hit play with the metronome on so I can hear how this actually works with the tempo. Okay, so there's a little bit of flamming going on, so I want to fix that. So if I zoom in here, for example, at measure 2, and again it looks like that is misaligned, so I'm going to hold my shift key down and I'm going to move that over where it ought to be. I can double click and add a warp marker there, and now I can pop that onto the grid. Now I want you to notice as I did that, it compressed everything to the left and expanded everything to the right. And some things are better aligned, but that's not good there. That's moved that further forward. So let me undo that a couple times. And I want to point out that what we can do is, as you're hovering your mouse over that transient marker, you can hold down your Command or Control key, and then you'll see that it's not only going to add a warp marker to the one that I'm pointing at, but if I double click, it's going to add one to either side. And when I do that, now I can move the one and better align that without moving anything else, because these two are pinned in place because they've been converted to warp markers. Now I might go over here to beat 4, hover my mouse, hold down my Command or Control key, double click, and move that one. And so I can go through and kind of manually pop ones onto the grid where I want them to be. Now, if you feel like the whole thing needs to be fixed, we can click select the area here and drag and select the area that we're working with, and I can quantize that, and I'll pull up the quantize setting dialog by going Command Shift U, that's Control Shift U on a PC, and now I can set the quantize level to the rhythm that I want to do that. And again, I've got some 16th notes here, so I'll do it at the 16th note level, and I'm going to do that at about 85%, and I'll click OK. Now you'll notice that it's taken every warp marker and transient marker, I should say, and upgraded it to a warp marker, and it's quantized it. Let's listen to how this is working with the metronome now. Okay, that's right with the metronome, and it's looping nicely, so we're ready to go. The last thing I would do with this particular iteration of the clip would be to right-click and choose Crop Sample from the contextual menu. And now I've got that perfect 4-measure loop that I can save into the library, and I'll be able to change the tempo on when I put this in the projects where I might use it. All right, let me hit Stop All Clips here, and I'm going to disable this track. And let's tab over into Arrangement View. And I'm going to hit the Back to Arrangement button so we're active here. So now I've got the same clip, but I've got it on individual tracks. And I've got these tracks linked so that when I edit one of these tracks, it will edit all of them. Now you might ask why. Well, if I want to fix a rhythmic problem here in one of these clips, I need to do it simultaneously to all the clips, because if I don't do that, as I move the problem on one track, I'm going to move that and any associated bleed out of phase with the same or related occurrences on the other tracks. So that's why I've linked these tracks together, so that as I edit something here on the kick-in track, it's going to make the same edit elsewhere. So again, I might zoom in here, let's say on beat 4 of measure 2 here, and again, I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key if you're on a PC, and I'm going to double click so that I get warp markers here, and I'm just going to pop beat 4 onto the grid. So we're looking at the kick in track as I did that, but if I go down to the kick out track, we see the same warp markers have been placed on each one of these other clips as I go down further. So the ability to use Ableton's warping functionality to edit rhythmic problems is game-changing. And these features take some time to understand and use effectively. So keep working with them and you'll soon be fixing problems that you would have given up on in the past.